It's all very well supporting Ukraine, which I fully agree with, but how do we do that and increase our standard of living in our struggling economy?
Harriet.
Well, here we will open up some points of difference between myself and Bridget Phillipson, because I do think that in order for us to have a strong and successful economy and growth, which we all do want as a nation, then you have to get behind those who create the wealth and the jobs, the businesses, and you have to allow them to succeed and thrive. And that creates economic growth, which enables you to spend more on your public services. And
why is she talking to us?
we had an election last year, and my party was soundly.
Yeah, you posted a fat owl. Yeah.
Why are you talking to us like we're fucking 5? If you grow the economy, that means more money for public services. We have literally been told this over and over again by Rachel Reeves for the last 2 years. They've been banging on about growing the economy to pay for public services. And I'm just like, well, turns out you can actually grow the economy through other means. Actually, you don't have to just cut yourself out into businesses. Because again, when they say we need to enable businesses to thrive, what they mean is fewer workers' rights, lower wages, because that's what having a competitive labour market means, which is what they had when they were in government. People don't want this. Again, you can say you want growth, right? But growth for whom? Growth for whom, right?
Exactly.
And even then, the extra fiscal headroom that they did have when they were in government, did they use this to increase funding for public services? Did they use this to be able to try and create the industries of the future, to be able to build public sector jobs for anybody, to be able to increase the level to which there was more prosperity for people? No, they just slashed money from taxes. They just did a tax cut, which was very little for the people on the bottom end, but was a really good tax cut for people on like £50,000 a year, which, fine, they're still working people. It's not unreasonable to tax cut these people, but are they really the ones who need it and not the people who are on like 20k who can't make ends meet?
But we were at that time the fastest growing economy in the
fuck
G7. Inflation had got down
For that particular quarter.
For the first half of last year, and we had got inflation back down again to 2%.
No. You didn't do anything about inflation. You didn't get inflation down. Inflation went down because it was a supply shock, and that went through the economy. You didn't take any actions to reduce inflation. There was nothing that was, because you can't do that to an exogenous shock to the economy. But as Jim Speak rightly points out in chat, like you didn't do anything. You just had to sit around fucking twiddling your thumbs.
True. Also, amazing freeze frame. Love it.
And I think it was against that backdrop that we then had a budget last October, which has put an enormous amount of pressure on the businesses that I speak to.
And someone think of the businesses.
Oh, this is 1.2 percentage point increase in employers' national insurance. Wow.
Increased national insurance, and particularly on those on the lowest pay. It's also increased a range of other taxes.
Well, hang on a minute.
Farmers are very concerned.
The taxes was on the employers. You can say that's going to get passed down to people on lower incomes, and that's a fault of the businesses. If they're taking it out of wages, not out of profits, they're the ones at fault if they're responding to these tax increases in this way. And second of all, the people on the I hate to defend Labour again for the second time, but for the people on the bottom rung of the ladder, the minimum wage has been increased by like more than £1 an hour, right? So the people on the lowest pay are actually getting a big pay increase, which you in the Commons, your party in the Commons, railed against as this big burden upon businesses, and quite frankly, couldn't give a shit.
A lot of family businesses very concerned about the taxes on them. And you've seen the reaction in terms of growth and the job market. And so I would urge this government, if they want to see a strong and successful and growing economy, to seriously think about reversing some of those tax increases on the wealth creators and the job providers of this economy.
Adrian,
Fuck off! Fuck off! Why are you applauding, you simpletons? Why the fuck are you job creators? Demand creates jobs. The labor is what creates the wealth in the first place, right? The people don't create jobs out of fucking thin air. There is a demand for a product. It's whether or not that is owned by the people who are doing the work or somebody screaming at the top that is the issue.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
even
no,
then, the public sector creates jobs too. If the public sector invests, right, which is what the government should be doing, and is failing to do on a large enough scale, that also creates jobs. Like, we had plenty of state jobs in state industries all the way up until 1979. People who are working for them, people working down the mines, for example. These were state jobs. It was British coal, British gas, British petroleum. And so again, this idea that you're taxing job creators, well, you're also using that money for investment into the public sector to create jobs there too. So at the end of the day, you're just moving around where the jobs are in the economy.
How do we support Ukraine? Obviously, part of that is increasing defence spending and at the same time increase our standard of living.
Well, as we've just been discussing, we absolutely have to support Ukraine because it's not only about supporting a country that's been the victim of evil aggression from Russia, but it's also about the security of Europe, the security of the UK. So we have got to put the investment into that. But what I find callous and just completely unjustified is the government planning to fund that by taking money from the most vulnerable, whether that's people who are reliant on welfare in the UK, single parents up and down the country, disabled people.
And
the most vulnerable around the world who are
not just people who are disabled, people who are long-term sick, people who are single parents, people who are unemployed, right? 38% of benefits being given out are to people who are in work in this country. One of the richest countries in the world. And we have people having their wages topped up through welfare payments because their pay is too fucking low. International disgrace. And they're having their welfare cut by this government.
benefiting, who are being kept alive, who are being supported in their communities by the international aid budget, which, by the way, is crucial for our security as well, because it's what keeps countries safe and stable afterwards.
So where would you get the money
True.
So
Good answer.
let's be very clear where we'd get the money from for those things, and for things like protecting the schools budget, I'm sure Bridget will want to do, and I certainly want to do. We would get the money from asking the richest in society, and I'm talking about multimillionaires, billionaires, to pay a bit more in tax, and I'm talking modestly.
Yes.
And you don't just have to ask me about that. You could ask some millionaires. I've been speaking to a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, who want to see money invested back into our country, and they've highlighted that 2/3 of millionaires favour the richest people being taxed more. That could raise, according to this report from the very people who know about money, it could raise 60 billion a year annually through a range of measures, asking the very richest to pay money that, by the standards of other European countries, would be quite modest. And if there happened to be a millionaire on the panel, I'd be interested to know whether they support.
Well, we'll ask him in a
the very
minute.
richest.
I wonder who he could have been referring to there.
It's also worth pointing out, I made this point earlier, make it again. If we are going to be spending money that this country, we keep getting told, doesn't have, there's this £22 billion black hole, we've got to slash departmental spending budgets and find the 20% of the least important spending and try and take money away from it. We're taking money away from the poor and the vulnerable, both domestically and internationally, right? And the country is falling apart at the seams. People, universally in this country, believe the country is broken. And this is because of a lack of investment, broadly, in the public realm in this country, right? The people who haven't had to deal with this are the rich. The people who own most of our country, because most of our country is just property and financial instruments. That's what most of the wealth is in this country, not an actual productive sector. It's the super rich who own that. They own huge amounts of property and huge amounts of financial assets that come from the UK's bond market, for example. You know, if we're going to be spending all this money to defend the property that they own all of the businesses, they own all of the corporations, they own all the property and the financial instruments. If we're going to be defending that with the blood of British people and British taxpayers, you know, then they should cough up the money to spend on the equipment that's necessary to defend it. It's as simple as that, because it's their they own the country now. We all sold it off in the 1980s to billionaire moguls and all of these oligarchs, right? The shock therapy of the 1980s. If their property is being defended with our defense budget, they got to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's a bit galling to have to go and fight the war and pay for it and get none of the benefits.
Yep.
That's a piss take. Yeah. We've got record numbers of billionaires. They're the only fucking booming industry we have is the number of billionaires. I reckon we could probably take some of that wealth.
And in the wise words of the brand new General Secretary of the RMT, Eddie Dempsey, because for the people at the top, they're having a disco and they're asking everybody else around us, all the people with nothing, to carry the can. It's not on.
Bro.
Adrian, we'll ask him in a minute. You've got a number of proposals as to how you're going to raise revenue. I mean, it's worth pointing out, and you'll be familiar with this quote from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, that they are saying that your radical ideas, which you suggest could make a positive difference.
Oh God! Again, it's because there's one opinion you're allowed, and even just taxing. What was it? They wanted a 1% tax or something.
It's 1% for 10 million and 2% for $1 billion, I believe, was the wealth tax metric.
And that's radical.
It's so radical that Norway does it. Radical communoid Norway has a wealth tax, which people will tell you hasn't brought in extra revenue. And this is basically a lie that got picked up by the Google AI algorithm because Elon Musk tweeted about it, but it's just totally untrue. There's a really great thread by James Medlock, who's a great American economist, going through, he actually went through all of the Norwegian kind of budgetary data and all of the spreadsheets that they have there explaining the taxable revenue at the time to prove it actually did raise more money. It did increase the coffers and reduce billionaire wealth as well.
Are wholly unattainable, and they help to poison the entire political debate. They're basically saying it's just fancy politics when it comes to raising revenue.
Which it is. We have engaged...
Well, they say the same of you as well. So
they certainly say the same of reform, but we have engaged with a range of academic experts, with groups like Patriotic Millionaires, about how you could raise the money based on robust studies, looking at what other countries could do. And we have shown how if you put the money into a better economy for the future, into the green economy, which is growing 3 times faster than the rest of our economy is, into the things that actually mean that people can stay healthy, can get access to the doctors and dentists when they need to. That's going to create jobs. It's going to create a healthier society. It's going to actually benefit all of us and keep costs down in the long run.
Can I just make a...
Very true. Pause. It's really worth pointing out that the framing here from Fiona Bruce was that, well, the IFS said that your plans were poisoning the political debate, as if the IFS were neutral actors here.
Yeah,
no, they are not as bad as other think tanks. They are broadly transparent in a way that some of the very right-wing think tanks are, but they are centre-right. They are neoliberal economists. Broadly, that is their opinion. There are plenty of more progressive, more heterodox economists who back up what Adrian is saying here, and so trying to present them as neutral actors here is bullshit.
Yeah. Exactly. These people who have a vested interest in supporting a different policy think that you're wrong. Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're not quite Tufton, but yeah, they're not neutral.
No, exactly. And so the broad kind of position that Adrian Ramsay is putting forward are pretty good. I think he should stop shouting. But I think the position that he staked here is actually really good. He's really connecting the audience with loads of applause. But the one thing you have to do is when people say that, well, the IFS said this, you just go, well, that's their opinion. Yeah. They are not a neutral actor here, right? Yeah. We have economists we've been speaking to who absolutely back this up. The tax is working in Norway. So the IFS, they can say whatever they want, but at the end of the day, they are a think tank, a centre-right think tank, who are never going to agree with our plan to tax the rich because that's not in their interest.
Patriotic millionaire that you are,
yep.
Would you want to pay more tax?
Look, I'm paying lots of tax.
Do you want to pay more?
Here's the point.
Do you want to pay more, as Adrian suggesting lots of millionaires?
No one wants to pay tax. What you want is your tax to be well...
No, that's not true. I'm fine with paying tax. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I quite enjoy living in a society. I know, you get fucking Joker memes at the ready. I enjoy living in civilization, and you have to pay for that. It doesn't just appear. So exactly. Yeah, I think you should pay your fair share. You're a millionaire. You can afford to pay more. You have more to protect and more vested interest. So stump up Otherwise, we might find another way of accessing that.
Well, this is what Warren Buffett describes it as his revolution insurance, or guillotine insurance is what he described it as, paying a higher rate of tax. At the end of the day, he says, well, no one wants to pay tax. And obviously we understand the social utility of such a system. But Adrian Ramsay is literally quoting a bunch of millionaires who say they want to pay more tax.
Do you think Gary Stevenson would ever get on Question Time?
Oh my God, I'd love it.
It would be good, but he's got a regional accent, so it's unlikely. He's not quite in that. He's not of that set, you know, and he's not an elected official. So
Spent, well invested. What we're seeing is we've got the highest taxes for 70 years. We've got the highest government.
not on the rich.
Not on the rich, no. In fact, the top rate of tax, the top marginal rate of tax, is less than half of what it was in the 1960s. So, you know, and also on top of this, you say, well, we have the largest tax burden. This is what he's talking about is as a percentage of GDP. So that's just to put this in context. But across the Anglosphere, across the Western world, or across Europe, all of the countries are seeing the same thing. And this is a consequence of, you know, the move to a service sector economy, the move away from the industrial economies. It's an aging population. It's having, you know, high level of social security and pensions, for example, that causes these taxes to go up. This is the natural ways in which these economies work. So to try and say this is somehow the fault of the fact that the con socialists are in government taxing you to the hilt. I'm just like, if you want to have a pension provision, you've got to pay for it. People are living longer. That's just the fact of the matter, is that we are healthier than we are previously. People are living longer because of scientific advancement, and retirement has to get paid for somehow.
Yeah, but this is what you've not dealt with. There is the fundamental conservative argument, which is I have all of the money and I want to keep having all of the money. Which is literally their economic outlook.
Spending for 70 years, and we've got the greatest amount of waste that any of us can ever remember. And here's the point: in the 80s,
whoa, what kind of stat is that? Hang on, whoa. At least you were basing things on things that are measurable. We've had the most amount of waste that any of us can remember. The fuck kind of statistic is that? What unit of measurement are you using for this imagined waste? So and why can governments never find this waste and always just have to take it away from frontline spending?
So what he probably means is like to kind of like wave kind of broadly at things like a DEI program or middle management. When
mice.
Literally, it's the same shit. It's the Doge stuff where they just go like, there's a bunch of things we don't need to be spending money on that we could be not spending money on, when these things are actually important when you look at the details, right? But there's this broad idea from the right that government must be inefficient. And yet, we had all of those cuts in the 2010s. David Cameron told us we would be doing efficiency savings. And did it lead to a more efficient state expenditure? No, it led to a reduction in service provision. What I would say, I think there is some level of inefficiency in government spending. I think there is some waste in government spending. But what I'm pointing to here is private sector subcontraction. Does the state need to be spending money on directorial salaries for the people who are getting government contracts? No. Does it need to pay money for the profits of these companies who are doing these private sector contracts? No. Do we need to be remunerating the shareholders of Sodexo to be having a public contract to be porters in the NHS? Absolutely fucking not. If you want to cut some waste, cut out the profit rather than the actual things that delivers either wages for public sector workers, which I'm sure he wants to cut, or service provision in terms of what the public sector does for the people, which he also wants to cut.
80s and 90s, we were growing at 2.5% to 3.5% every single year. Now, we're not growing at all. We've got to change course. You can't tax your way out of a crisis, Adrian. You've got to grow your way out of a crisis. Smart taxation, cut daft regulations, now that thankfully we've left the European Union, stop wasteful government.
For now, I'd be very worried if I were you, mate. Just saying.
Spending, like spending 100 million quid on a bat shed. Since the election, actually, lots of economists, and during the election, agreed with my plans with regard to, for example, not paying voluntary interest from the Bank of England on all the QE printed money. That would be £30 billion.
What about the rest of it? What about the rest of the Institute Fiscal Society saying it's
well,
just
funny, isn't it? So I said we should save £5 and 100. Darren Jones has just recently written, he's the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has just written to all departments saying save £5 in 100. Having been elected.
Yes, the Labour government have taken on not even Tory economic plans, reform economic plans.
Got the Tories out though. We got the Tories. Are you happy with the Tories out?
I'm
good, isn't it?
Honestly, the amount of quiet is deafening.
We really love this. They really love this, you know, the sensible government where they copy policies from Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. It's great, isn't it? It's nice, isn't it?
We're all happy to pay taxes as long as it is well spent, and that is what we're not doing.
Hang
very
on,
well.
you just said you weren't happy
the
to pay
madness
tax.
of net stupid zero, which is increasing all our energy costs.
All right.
making
We
it-
may come
can't,
to that.
That's no. You need to come up with a fun name for it. You can't just add the word "stupid" in the middle. That is lazy as fuck.
And also just nonsense. It's totally nonsense that net zero is making us poorer. No, gas is making us poorer because of marginal pricing. Marginal cost pricing means that we pay for the most expensive type of energy generation that is used to create the energy. And as soon as we switch on the gas power, that instantly increases the price because the strike price for gas power, the vast majority of the time, is much higher than for wind and solar. So gas is what is making it higher because we have a spiked gas price, right? It's bought on international markets. You can't just open up more gas in the North Sea and affect the global price for oil and for gas, which is broadly controlled by OPEC Plus and the countries that are part of that cartel that make sure that the gas, even if we increased our gas supply, they would reduce in turn to keep the price stable for them, for their interest and their overall geopolitical reasons. And so, if you wanted to have lower prices for energy, first of all, you'd fuck off marginal cost pricing because that shit sucks. And second of all, you'd want to have an increase in energy generation for the sectors that have cheaper strike prices, which isn't oil and gas, which is what he wants to do.